I was extremely nervous. I literally had no reason to think I would be any good at the job. And that project that I got staffed on was one of the largest life science companies in the world. There was a new CEO coming into the role, and our job was to basically do a review of the entire business to help them get up to speed as quickly as possible. To give you a sense of how high stakes the project was, for all of the main meetings with the client, the other juniors and I were not even allowed into the client building. We were literally huddled around a telephone in our main office while the senior team members went to present the work. In this video, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it's actually like to work in consulting, in my case at McKinsey, in London, as a medical doctor for 3 years. And I want to share with you why I think that doctors are really well suited to this role, give you some particular reasons why I think that's the case, and also describe some of the things that I learned in the process and how they've helped me in my life today. When I joined McKinsey in 2015, it was my first non-medical job. I was extremely anxious about making a good impression, and everybody that I'd met up until that point seemed really smart, really friendly, really in control of their stuff. As for me, I was a bit of a nervous wreck. I just felt anxious about how I would meet their expectations. And to recap a little bit about why I transitioned out of medicine to McKinsey, honestly, I was feeling a little stuck in my career. Although I enjoyed many parts of my medical job, I really wanted to learn skills that would be useful in a bunch of different situations. For example, first principles thinking, problem solving. And I wanted to get familiar with working with businesses, also working with government, and carve out a bit of a broader niche than the path I was on as an ophthalmologist. I wanted an on-the-job MBA, something that would expose me to business in a short period of time and help me to learn a whole bunch of useful skills. Now, back to the story. Now, the project I was staffed on that I described earlier had already been running for about 3 months when I joined. Imagine it like this. The train is moving at full speed and you basically have to jump aboard and get up to speed with everything. And because it was such a critical piece of work, the whole team was actually a little bit on edge. Initially, it was quite tricky to know how to be helpful. For example, there was a large financial model that one of my colleagues was building, and she'd been working on it for months. At one point, I thought, hey, maybe I'm just here to collect the printouts to make the tea and coffee. But actually, that wasn't the case. And a big part of our project was actually talking to industry experts to understand their views on the potential of a whole bunch of different imaging modalities in the future. So we were trying to understand where CT, MRI, ultrasound, mammography, all of these different modalities were going. And that meant 1-hour conversations with a bunch of experts, academics, investors. And it turned out that I was basically the only person in the team that could run those conversations and who didn't have to keep referring to a wiki to remind myself what the difference between CT and MRI was. And I could ask intelligent questions because I'd worked in hospitals and I'd used this type of imaging before. And so that content knowledge was a real asset to the team. And it meant that on that specific work stream, I got up to speed really fast and was able to synthesize this huge amount of information that had been passed our way from these experts in a relatively short period of time. Contrast that to what I was worrying about when I joined the team. All I could think about was the fact that I didn't know how to Excel model. I hadn't made slides before. To give you an example of why I was concerned about modeling, one of my colleagues was building a model. I think it had about 5 to 10 tabs in Excel. And as she was building it, I noticed that her hands never left the keyboard. She was literally navigating this massive mathematical model just with the keyboard. And she was able to almost update it with her eyes closed. And I was just so frightened to actually make any changes because I was certain that I would break it in the process. So by the end of the project, the partner that was running the project told me that he was convinced that I had actually made an impact and shared some really nice feedback from one of the clients about the relationship that I had struck up with them, the fact that I had joined halfway through the project and had really helped the team out in certain ways. That initial experience gave a huge boost to my confidence. A kind of funny thing happened, which is that because I had spent 2 to 3 months working on this space, amongst the junior to mid-level people working in London at McKinsey at the time, I basically had the most knowledge, along with maybe 1 or 2 other people, of the medical devices and imaging space. So I sort of became a bit of a quasi-internal expert, which meant that if I wanted to work on similar projects in the future, I had a really strong hand when it came to picking my projects, because I had an area of domain expertise. So I had relevant content knowledge at a time where most of my peers who were fresh graduates didn't actually have any industry experience or domain knowledge. So let me summarize what I think are some of the key reasons that doctors make a great fit in consulting. The first one is the content knowledge. Now, healthcare and life sciences represented at the time, I think, about 1/3 of all of the work at the company. That includes healthcare delivery services, the payers, which in the UK is the National Health Service, but it also includes pharmaceutical and biotech companies, medical device companies, medical consumables, and everything else in that space. So it's a huge domain. And as a medical doctor, you have really relevant knowledge you can empathize with a lot of the stakeholders of these businesses, whether it's patients or it's healthcare professionals on the front lines. The second thing is that as a doctor, you're basically trained to speak to people every day. By taking a history from patients, which is one of the core things you learn at medical school, you learn how to empathize with people, you learn how to ask the right questions, how to dig deeper into sensitive topics. And that confidence and ability to speak to patients, for me, was a huge asset and really helped accelerate my development. And ultimately in consulting, your client is king, so being good with clients is like a superpower. Thirdly, as a doctor, you're used to working hard, you're used to working late into the night on critical tasks where you need to maintain your concentration. Now, there's two things I want to point out that I personally experienced, which are things to look out for as a doctor. The first is that as a doctor, a lot of your focus is on keeping your patients happy, supporting them during the journey. As a consultant, especially at McKinsey, you actually need to challenge your clients. One of the things that the company prides itself on is being able to challenge your clients to have difficult conversations. So for a while, I actually found it really difficult to be firm or to instill the right amount of concern in my clients about something that we were worried about as a team. The second is that as a doctor, you can be quite risk averse, or you can feel that, you really need to get all the relevant information before you make a decision. In the world of business, sometimes you have to get comfortable with some ambiguity. You have to make decisions with limited information. So again, I think that's a chasm that a lot of people from academia or medicine often have to cross when they go into the world of business. And it's even more so if you then go on to work in a startup. Now, as I look back, having left the company a few years ago, I can say with a high degree of confidence that it was a great move for me. When I founded my startup, the learnings from my time at McKinsey were really important, particularly when it came to raising capital. So I think it's a really good training ground, a really good preparation for anyone out there who's working in a healthcare role, who wants to have a really good launch pad into the world of business. I also recently released a video covering 10 things that medical students can do to start getting involved in health tech. If you haven't checked that out, make sure you take a look at that video now. If you have any questions or comments, you want to hear more about my time there, you want me to look at this from a specific perspective, please drop those below. I will do my best to answer all of them. I would love to hear from you. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for listening. See you next time.